nice to see you all here. I'm just going to read a handful of poems from my book, which came out last month, Pleasure Principle. Thank you. I'm going to start with a poem called Leaving. Not the pleasure of lovers, but the pleasure of letters, a pleasure like weather, delayed and prepared for. Not the pleasure of lessons, but the pleasure of errors, of nightmares, of actors in the black box of a theater. Not the pleasure of present, but the pleasure of later, the pleasure of letters and weather and terror, asleep by the lake, unable to answer, the pleasure of candles, their wax on the table, not the pleasure of saviors, but the pleasure of errors, not the pleasure of marriage, but the pleasure of failure, the pleasure of characters like family members, their failures and errors, their laughter and weather, the pleasure of water, terrible rivers, not the pleasure of empire, but the pleasure of after, our failure to keep an accurate record, not the pleasure of tethers, but the pleasure of strangers, the terrible strangers who will become your lovers, not the pleasure of novels, but the pleasure of anger, your failure to answer all of my letters, the pleasure of daughters writing letters in April, the failure of orchards, the terror of mothers, not the pleasure of planners, but the pleasure of errors. Oh, you can just clap at the end. Thanks. This is a poem about being depressed in Provincetown. It's called Provincetown. Rachel says I have a hungry ghost inside me, that my generation doesn't know our own history. By the harbor, men walk together in muscular pairs, and for some reason, all I think about is death. Death at the Maritime Cemetery, death at the dispensary with gangly adolescents, death at the sex shop where I run my hands over the harnesses and leave, purchasing nothing. Death as dusk hits clapboard houses. I thought by 27 I'd stop searching for the story, as if stories were simultaneous with action, rather than events recollected incorrectly, rife with holes. My character wades waist deep in the bay, waiting for a revelation. I want the plot to start here, at the end of the two-lane highway, and then in the moonlight dunes, the scrubby grass we trudged through. Let's see. This is a poem about having a bad time at a wedding. It's called Laurel Canyon Wedding. Tonight I'm speeding past the date palms, the wispy hills like the heads of blonde infants. Behind me, a party where little pieces of meat were served on silver trays, and the groom's mother cried, describing him as a boy, and then said, "Now you belong to your wife." And everyone raised their champagne flutes. And I looked across the patio at the bartender and saw that she was looking at me, and we both looked away, and a drone flew above us, capturing the night, creating an archive. And the bride closed her eyes and threw a bouquet behind her toward a row of thin-armed women in pink. Actually, at first, the bride only pretended, and the women jumped and landed, empty-handed. And I remembered how my sister and I would trick our dog like this, mimicking throwing the ball, but at the last moment holding on to it, so that the dog would run far into the meadow after nothing. This is a poem that I wrote after I met someone who would become a very important person in my life, and I just had a desire to quickly write a lot of facts about myself, and it's called An Explanation. I do not like milk. I wish I knew more children. I am not afraid of heights. I do not fear deep water. I used to be the fastest swimmer, just the fastest out of all the girls, and once when I was 21, I hitchhiked from a rest stop in eastern Indiana to Chicago in a logging truck. I slept atop the trucker's backseat fold-out bed with my cell phone and a small black knife. At dawn, he left me by the outer suburbs, from which I called a cab directly to the doorstep of someone else I loved. And then at 23 in Lebanon, I slept alone atop a mountain and woke to my tent surrounded at all sides by a sea of grazing sheep, some with bells, their soft mouths moving by the hundreds. And across the road, 2 rams collided, and the shepherd texted, and I thought, if I have a daughter, I hope she's nothing like me, and from the valley came a smell of burning. I'm just gonna read one more. It's the last poem in the book, but it's the first poem that I wrote that made its way into the book. It's the oldest. It's called Creation Myth. Because a hand came out and pushed down the land. Because a boy tried to hold 2 dogs together. Because you wrote her about it. You sent a letter. Because peacocks made cat-like sounds in the mountains, and someone knocked twice, 3 times, on a smooth wooden door. Because one's parents stared at each other on a delayed train, gray commuters, and blood ran through a divot and bloomed, became water spilling from the lion-mouthed fountain. Because an impossibly large structure was built. A pond used to exist at the edge of our city. Mosquitoes swarmed through the tall grasses. Because one could die without knowing this, the wild heart of all objects. In the dark, I mark myself. One can be alive again. One can be alive 10,000 times. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have Jamila Minnicks.
Hello, everybody. I know I don't want to eat up too much time, but I do want to say thank you to Leah and all the staff for making this such an incredible conference, for allowing all of us writers to be in community with one another for 12 glorious days. So, can you hear me better? All right, so I'm not going to give you too much except for to tell you, A, that I'm trying to pull it up, and B, that this is a love story that is going to go into a new story collection of mine. It's called Eclipsing Eternity. Not yet, beloved. Our last kiss still lingers on my lips, an embrace transformed into the essence of being loved. It keeps me warm when I am a sliver of myself and balms my ache when we are exiled from each other across the sky. Our connection transcends clockwork, ushering day and night, regardless of time or distance. You are my husband, and I, your wife. Not yet, beloved. Yes, eternity's betrayal begins and ends in these short moments we align, but remember, the cosmos were birthed of our first union, and this universe is bound by our spell. We command seconds to be seconds and warn minutes not to outlast their time. So tonight, as we come together in my sky, since we have the time, and since we make the time, tonight, let's take our time. Not yet, beloved. You've hardly just arrived. The day still clings to you as the blue adorns the jay, but this obsidian bath has awaited since you answered my whispers on the wind. Who knows why eternity chose mercy over the cruelty of another vast and tortuous night? I wish I knew what warms forever's heart. But when I whisper yearning on the wind and your words find their way to me, the pain of eternal separation turns to loving anticipation of your nearness. So please, leave the blue behind and close the door. Let's immerse you in the night before we kiss. Not yet, beloved. How mischievous to try and pull me into your bath. I need not join you because I stay cleansed by the shade of the deep, deep sea. Can't you smell the cherries perfuming my skin and the moonflowers in my hair? I said smell, beloved, not inhale, beloved, the redolence on my neck. How am I to bathe you in the night if you insist on playing silly games? Sit still and let me rinse away the remnants of your day. Please relax, beloved. Be easy, beloved. Be still. Do you rush because you're eager, or is there perhaps another reason? Do you not recognize the intensity of your rays? The cosmos are imprisoned beyond your limitless blue until the day's only celestial body is you, the planets, shield eyes to regard you. Your brilliance blinds, browns, and burns. Your unquestionable power makes life of death and death of life. Yet I can rise into your sky unharmed, observing and absorbing your glow as you drift towards sleep. It is my blessing and my curse for us to share an orbit bound for all eternity, yet impoverished of your touch. Every night as I rise in the east and you descend in the west, I pray whispers across the sky. Lamentations of love with which eternity must interfere, perhaps because should we lose our heads to love, how will the oceans know to rise and fall, or plants know to grow and sleep? How will the living carry on if we get lost in our obsession for one another? After you've nestled underneath the horizon, I invite the heavens out to play. No, they can't turn my head, beloved, but just as you are a century to the day, this darkness is my realm. And inside my night, I release the cosmos from your prisons. They may rise and glow. See how the stars wink and gather and live quietly bright, or how the youngest and oldest twinkle softly in and out of life. An infinite many shoot and shine and preen throughout my universe, yet none of them playing in this vastness is you. You may deny them all, wash them out by your power during the day, but once you've laid your head to rest, I let them free. Why? Because look around you, beloved. My sky is full of chatter. These cosmos make jokes and tell stories. They have longing and regret. Celestial bodies travel distances untold and return with tales spiced by their journeys. They seek love, so let them find love as you and I have found love. As this bath boils down around you and your steam mingles with my sweat, I shimmer, basking in you. I'm no fool. I know you'll devour me as soon as I lean close, though you'll claim you're just admiring my scent. Why should such orbit belong just to us when the sky carries so much conversation? So since the night sky is my sky, I let them dance and play. Shed your jealousies, my love, and let them shine. Now that you're clean and smelling of orange blossoms and sweet earth from which they grow, let me wrap this robe around you. There's nectar in the parlor made from gentle rain and sweet honeysuckle and wild blackberries falling from the vine. No, not cherries, beloved, blackberries, and look at you being fresh. Your cheekiness always makes my skin the same deep cherry as my perfume. Your words bring warmth to my flesh, especially when your gaze wanders underneath my silk robe and you steal these kisses on the spot where my jaw intersects my neck. But slow down, beloved, and try the nectar on the table. Taste the blackberries. I caught them falling from the vine. Yes, of course, I'm saying yes, but why the urgency when the night is finally ours? I say yes, but for now, quiet your mind from rushing time and remember when we married the sky, when time was merely a figment of imagination. My world was perpetually dark, for that was my creation, and in that onyx sky, clouds floated by in quietly animated conversation, this one speaking to that one, avoiding the other, flirtations accepted and rebuffed. Some joined in simple yet phenomenal unions, connections delicate yet impenetrable. The same winds that hurried those clouds along carried kisses between distant stars and returned with the stardust of an excited yes. Then the wind lifted the veil of whispers and kisses and stardust, and it was you and me locked in an eternal dance. We created time in our first kiss, joining day to night as though that was the way it had always ever been. That simple embrace turned us into God and Goddess of the heavens, above jealousy and insecurity and the silly vulnerabilities of flesh, even as the universe peeked and peeped, this white silk pooling around my ankles. I turned deep cherry then as I do now, because though it was you, my beloved, coming to visit me in my sky, my flesh was exposed for all to see. We were ravenous to the brink of recklessness until eternity lectured that time's nascency needed our nurture and guidance, that this thing we created relies upon the steadiness of our heads to make day as inevitable as night. But eclipse was the inevitable result of us. After that first golden dawn and salmon dusk, with arms wrapped tight around one another, our worlds were joined across the heavens. Starburst blossomed into stars, clouds flirted, laughed, and played. The wind blew from night to day, spreading gossip and thoughts of love. All around us, the heavens coupled, tripled, making itself anew, binding you and I together with eternity. But as the second dawn approached, eternity revealed the cruelty of our union by styling you as day and me as night, night after day, day after night. Eternity promised togetherness, yet apart, so that life can play upon this playground. Evening after evening, as I rose into your sky, tried whispering love into the wind, past eternity's tight fist, but night after night passed with no response, until, perhaps from rarest pity, or because its fist was too full of my pleas to hold another, one day I whispered, and you whispered back, and that night, like tonight, you said, I miss your scent, your touch, the warmth of you in my arms. Please, please answer me, my darling. And I met you at the door, blushing then as I do now under the intensity of your rays. You arrived so suddenly and unexpectedly, our connection the most natural thing ever made. So let us slow down, relax our minds of seconds, years, and eons. For what is time when we are time? Where I reduce the time your fingers graze my ribs there, or caress my jaw here, to measurements that will never be long enough. Will knowing mean less heartache when we part? We make the time, so let us take our time, because the one thing we cannot stop is time. How can I help but blush when you whisper in my ear, your skin is like cherries, and while the blackberries are delightful, dark cherries are still the sweetest fruit. The promise of your voice always turns my skin this deep red underneath white silk. I am a celestial body, after all. So as my white silk falls away in the cosmos, watch the remembrance in your kiss evokes yes from my lips, yes from my skin, yes from my hips, until the dawn. The time has come for indigo to creep into the sky and reclaim you. Yes, beloved, I love how you fluff my pillow, and thank you for my tea. Tonight I will rise, full and bright, whispering your name, listening for your prayers, looking for you across the heavens. A kiss before you go? Of course. How else will I ever remember the feeling of being loved? That's it. And now introducing Katie Tastrom.
My waterproof mascara. That was so good. Oh my gosh, I have to follow that. That's okay. Sorry. Whew. So my name is Katie Tastrom. My first book was published in May by PM Press, and it's called, is this a good place for this? Okay. And it's called People's Guide to Abolition and Disability Justice. And I'm happy to talk about that at any time, which is a threat. But right now I'm working on something completely different, but do you all hear the echo? Is that just me? Is that just part of this? Okay. Sorry, I'll try to deal with it. I'm working on, it's basically saying the same things, but in creative nonfiction essays. Right now, it's called Prone, Essays on Violence, Sickness, and Other Risks of Having a Body. This is an essay from it called Inheritance. In the piece, there are parts in bold, which are quotes from Sally Samir, who's a Palestinian illustrator, whose Instagram is at Sally_Samir_, but she also has quotes on there. And I'm gonna try to indicate when it's kind of bold, but no promises. All right, ooh. Inheritance, in bold. They seek revenge through our children. It's a quote from Wael al-Dado, an Al Jazeera reporter in Gaza who lost several family members which he learned while live on air. My grandfather died at a convenient time. I don't mean to sound callous. He would take that as a compliment. He was very practical. He didn't like to rock the proverbial boat. He wasn't a big talker unless you were talking about the weather. Most people bring up the weather as an easy point of shared connection to make small talk. Not my grandfather. I'm sure it had something to do with having grown up on a dairy farm, but he talked animatedly, for him, about precipitation, temperatures, and what different crops did or didn't need rain. Because he wasn't the soul-bearing type, I can't be sure, but he did not seem scared to die. He was ready. When his prostate cancer was diagnosed, he didn't get treatment. When I asked about it, he'd say, "Where am I going, Beanie?" using the nickname he's used for me since I was a baby. There are a lot of ways that question can be asked, but he meant it rhetorically. As in, what left did he have to do? He was ready to take his eternal place in heaven, which he believed was waiting for him. Bold. They all went to paradise without me. A 6-year-old boy from Gaza in response to a question from his family. It was good timing for me because I was living with my parents in upstate New York for a few months, a pit stop between living in Seattle and starting law school in Syracuse. This meant that I got to spend more time with him in his last months and be of practical assistance with all the small chores of an American death in the 21st century. Fighting with pharmacies, fighting with a cable company, fighting with health insurance, etc. One of the tasks I was able to take on was to clean out my grandfather's small one-bedroom senior living apartment next door to the library I went to as a kid. The small complex had affordable, clean, and comfortable housing for seniors who could mostly live on their own but needed some occasional assistance. The tidy apartment was nicer than anywhere I had lived and gave him the kind of autonomy that many people his age have to give up to get the care they need. It didn't take very long to clear out all the stuff from his apartment. A few cousins came and grabbed some particle board furniture. I took the rest for my new apartment. He made it very easy on me because he wasn't the kind of person who liked having stuff. Before he died, he only had 2 forks because he had gotten rid of the rest. Though friendly, even before his health really declined, he knew he wasn't the kind of person to have someone over to share the lean cuisines or cans of soup he'd eat for dinner. But besides the requisite proud grandfather photos of my cousins and I on the wall and the basket of medication on the table, it was as impersonal as an Airbnb. I think the sparseness is part of why I was so surprised with what I found in the cabinet underneath the television. While of course it could have been much more scandalous, I was still shocked to see several books and DVDs from the Left Behind series in a haphazard stack of fallen media. Bold. Thanks God, people. God watered us with rain. Fresh water, people. A boy from Gaza. Though I had heard of the series, all I knew was the movie starred one of the lesser teen heartthrobs of my youth, and it was vaguely about the end of the world. Specifically, the rapture, a word that I associated more with Debbie Harry than the Bible. Left Behind began with novels written by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins that were also turned into movies. Though they are categorized as fiction, the books aren't meant to be taken as just stories, but as actual predictions of an impending, non-metaphorical Armageddon. They espouse a theology based on a literal interpretation of the biblical book of Revelations. Barbara R. Rossing wrote for Yale's Reflections about the influence of so-called end times fiction. Increasing numbers of U.S. Christians believe that the book of Revelation predicts an end-time battle of Armageddon in the Middle East. For such extreme Christian Zionists, including Left Behind authors and millions of others, absolute support for Israel's sovereignty over the entire Holy Land is necessary, even including demolishing the Dome of the Rock so that the third Jewish temple can be rebuilt and the raging warrior Christ can return to earth. As Rossing notes, these books are part of the propaganda that has increased... residual tears. The propaganda that has increased the power and credulity of Christian Zionists. Christian Zionists believe that the state of Israel needs to exist not out of concern and protection for Jewish people, or even to avoid what they think is the end of the world, but because they want to bring it on. Bold. His name is Yusuf, a curly-haired cutie with fair skin, a mother from Gaza searching for her killed son in a hospital. I understand finding comfort in the inevitability of the end of the world when your own end is impending. Not to get too armchair psychologist, one of the authors of the books, Tim LaHaye, spoke of a similar fear in an interview with Terry Gross. Quote, But I'll be honest with you. My wife and I have kiddingly said, we've been married for 55 years. We would love to be part of the rapture instead of either one of us having to face death of the person we love, to go together in the rapture. And it's a comfort to us to know that in the twinkling of an eye, in a moment, Jesus could shout and we could be translated into heaven forever and ever and ever and ever. Bold. She is my mom. I know her from her hair. A girl from Gaza recognizing the dead body of her killed mother. Besides his confidence that his reservation in heaven would be honored, my grandfather wasn't someone I would have called religious. I don't remember him going when I was younger, but at the end of his life, he would attend church services when he was able to make it. But it didn't seem spiritual as much as something to check of his to-do list. He seemed to treat it like deposits in his heavenly bank account, which he counted on to buy real estate in the good place. It wasn't until cleaning out his small apartment that I understood how much he believed in this bizarre Christian Zionism. And it wasn't until the recent escalation of the ongoing genocide against Palestinians, stages 9 and 10, according to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, that I understood how powerful Christian Zionism is. Learning about it felt like a fish discovering water, finally finding out what this slippery cold thing is that isn't quite visible, yet we all feel. The vast majority of Israel support in the U.S. comes from Christian Zionists. Ron Demmer, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., calls evangelical Christians the backbone of Israel's support in the United States. He also noticed that Jewish people in the U.S. were more likely to criticize Israel than evangelical Christians. Christians United for Israel reported 10 million members, makes it over 3 times larger than the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the most well-known Zionist lobbying organization. Friends of Sabel North America, which calls itself a Christian Voice for Palestine, has a counter-Kufi toolkit that says, Christians United for Israel has quietly become the largest organization in the United States driving support for Israel's colonization and military occupation of Palestine, including the imprisonment of Palestinian children, the bombing of homes, schools, and hospitals in Gaza, massacring peaceful protesters, and the confiscation of Palestinian land. CUFI has cemented its place as a religio-nationalist organization that openly drives U.S. imperialism and the ongoing colonization of Palestine, all in the name of Christianity. It is clear that the bulk of Israel's support in the U.S. comes not from Jewish people, but Christian. Bold. Uncle, I'm very sad. I'm afraid for my mom. I want my mom so much. And Nana, a toddler from Gaza crying in the hospital. As children die by the thousands, I wonder why the mainstream Zionist talking point is that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic when Christians are the strongest supporters of Zionism in the U.S. I am fortunate to have many Jewish friends who are involved in anti-Zionist organizing who have taught me, by their activism but also just their existence, that being against the actions of the Israeli government is not inherently anti-Semitic, and many in fact feel that their Jewish faith requires Palestinian solidarity. My friend Nomi Lamb has been doing Palestinian solidarity work as a Jewish person for over 25 years. I talked to them while they were in Washington, D.C. to attend a march to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. They explained, what the state of Israel is doing that is so devastated and goes so much against Jewish values is then we have people around us trying to gaslight us into thinking that's what happening is okay somehow, or that the fear of others is justified. Nomi also talked about the racist way that Israel paints Palestinians and Arabs as inherently anti-Semitic. They say, it's portrayed that there's a centuries-long war and conflict, but that's not the story that I know from Arab Jews whose families have lived in the area. I have 2 different friends that I can think of who have family that go back 10 generations in Jerusalem. The formation of the State of Israel and the partitioning of Palestine by European colonial powers led to anger at Jews from surrounding countries. Yet again, fear comes up. Nomi says, it's easy to control a population that's afraid, and Jews are afraid for real reasons, and so many of us know that solidarity is a solution, not isolation and militarism. But we are not the ones that have any control over it. It's so depressing. Though there are people who use Israel as an opportunity to be anti-Semitic, and there's absolutely a larger anti-Semitism problem, including one on the left, criticizing Israel isn't necessarily anti-Semitic. In fact, they taught me that it's problematic to assume that all Jewish people are Zionists, just as it is to assume any kind of people all have one singular ideology. This goes on for a bit more, but I'll stop there. Sorry, I was trying not to cry, so I was like looking down more than usual, but thank you. And Jean Chen Ho is next.
Hello. Thank you for that, Katie. It's an honor to read here, to share a stage with Madeleine and Katie and with Jamila. I am going to read from my story collection, Fionna and Jane. This is a linked story collection. If someone tells you that it's a novel, they are incorrect. If you read a review that it's a novel, they are wrong. It's a linked story collection, and it's about two best friends who are Taiwanese American women growing up in Southern California, and the book spans their teenage years into their 20s and 30s, and gets into their lives, their families, sex, things of that nature. So I'm gonna read from a story called Go Slow. This is actually my favorite story in the book. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but it's my favorite story. And when you write a story collection, you have parts of it published beforehand, and then when they also try to help you place stories ahead of publication and things like that. And this was the one story that was sent to maybe like 50 different places, and nobody wanted to publish it. And I don't know if it's just like a bad story or if it's too cringe, but it's my favorite story, and it's a story when our two protagonists are 16 years old. They're in high school. They're getting in trouble. They got fake IDs. They start drinking. This is very fictional. It's not based on my life at all. And they start drinking, and then they get invited to this party with some older boys. So they drive down to Long Beach. Is anybody from Long Beach here? Long Beach, California? Okay, so 562 repping. So they drive down to a motel room in Long Beach, and they're at this party. The white boy who opened the door to room 205 wore a black Raiders beanie. Tiny silver hoops dangled from both his earlobes. Sung's UCLA friends? So I should explain that they got invited to this party by a guy named Sung, and they had lied and told him they go to UCLA. Sung's UCLA friends, come in, come in. He stepped aside for us. What's your names? I'm Koala, he said. Koala, Fionna repeated. Like the marsupial? Damn, girl, he said with a laugh. What'd you call me? Koala threw an arm out and gestured at the guys who sat on one of the beds. That's Johnny, and the butt-ugly one over there, that's Viet. There were two queens in the room, each covered by a pink comforter patterned with white conch shells. Pink ruffle skirts grazed the tan carpet, which still bore vacuum lines. A McDonald's bag rested on the nightstand between the beds, the bottom stained by oil blots. Got anything to drink? Fionna's voice brightened the room. Should we take off our shoes? We got vodka, tequila, pineapple. Pineapple rum, said Viet. We got ice, we got juice and mixers, whatever you need, he added. None of that nasty soju stuff. Sure, Fionna said cheerfully. That's why we came. She elbowed me and whispered, Smile, Jane. Why do you look like that? Make them your specialty, Johnny called out. You never had jungle juice like Viet makes, he added excitedly. You're in for a treat because this mofo's straight up from the jungle. Johnny cracked up at his own joke, slapping his knees. You so stupid, man, Viet said, shaking his head. He turned his finger in circles around his temple. This guy did too many drugs in high school. He's a walking billboard for just say no. Johnny was still laughing by himself, red with joy. Does Sung tell you we're related, he said. Cousins. He got the looks in the family, but I'm the smart one. Viet walked over to the kitchenette and opened the door to the mini fridge under the sink. He wore a tight white tank, and underneath the thin, ribbed fabric, his nipples were visible, 2 dark coins on his chest. His black athletic pants rustled whenever he moved. Of the 3, Viet was the best looking, with his hollow cheeks and brooding eyes. He had a thin, morose face, sculpted with hard planes like a marble bust. His entire head was shaved, except for a thin fringe of long bangs, which he wore combed back. One strand on the left side was bleached a dark orange color. Then Johnny, who wasn't outright fine, but pretty cute in a goofy way. I wondered if he really was Sung's cousin, or if he said it as a joke. They looked nothing alike. The skin on his cheeks was riddled with tiny scars like the rind on an overripe orange, and he had a set of dark eyebrows that arched up dramatically, lending his face an amused, almost crazed expression. and Koala's nickname was cruel in its accuracy. His beady brown eyes set too close together, and that long, bulbous nose, which indeed seemed a shade darker than the rest of his face, just like the snout on a koala bear. Being the white boy of the group, though, Koala held a certain exotic appeal. A thought came to me unbidden. When Sung arrived, there would be 4 of them and 2 of us. And what would happen then? Are there more people coming? I asked. You're bored already, Koala said. Sung said it was going to be a party. Oh, we're just getting started. Don't you worry, baby girl. When Viet mixed our drinks, Koala invited us to make ourselves comfortable. Get up, fool, he said to Johnny. Make room for the ladies. Johnny moved to sit on one of the dinette stools where Viet stood at the bistro table pouring from different bottles into 5 red cups. I gotta get me a pair of breakaways like these, Johnny said. He stretched out one of his legs and rubbed his foot on the side of Viet's pants, along the row of white buttons that ran from waist to cuff. Easy access, man. Snap, bam, there it is. He finished with a playful kick to Viet's butt. Koala leaned forward in the rolling chair next to the door, using his heels to scoot closer to the bed where Fiona and I sat. We accepted cups from Viet, filled nearly to the top with brown liquid and ice cubes. What's in this? I asked. I sniffed at the rim. Fiona took a tiny sip and then another. It's not bad, she said. Koala edged closer, watching her lick her lips. I pretended to sip from my own cup. Boring, Johnny said. Down that shit, he cried. 1 shot. He drank from his cup, tilting the entire contents down his throat. His Adam's apple jumped each time he swallowed. Ice cubes fell on his face, a wet glaze on his nose and under his eyes. He jerked around and shook himself, invigorated. 1 shot, he chanted, pumping alternating fists in the air. 1 shot, 1 shot. Come on, Fiona. Koala smiled at me. He held his cup out. You got this, girl. I'm not Fiona, I said. Dumbass, Viet said. That's Jane. Can we drink yet? Koala raised the cup to his mouth. You think Sung's coming soon? Fiona asked. Sung? Koala wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Fuck that guy. Viet and Johnny broke out laughing. That fool owes me 20 bones. He owes me 40, Johnny added. His eyes tilted toward the ceiling. No, wait, I owe him 40. What's my dude always talking about? I got 3 jobs. Koala used a whining voice to imitate Sung. I'm working graveyard this weekend. I gotta put in hours at the grocery store, he added. And Sung is still the brokest motherfucker I know. The guys laughed again. He slid his eyes toward Fiona. The girlies like him, though. Looking like one of those K-pop boy bands, Viet said. Homie's about to get a perm next. Does he have a girlfriend? Fiona asked. Who's asking? Said Koala. This made Viet and Johnny roar. Hey, I said to Fiona in a low voice. Slow down with that. I nodded toward her cup, which was half empty. She smiled, but shot me a look that meant I was being a buzzkill. Remember our sign? I held up 2 fingers and wiggled them in the air down by my lap. She turned away from me and took another sip from her cup. So, where do you guys go to school? School, said Koala. We don't do that. We got bigger dreams, Johnny added. Then he repeated himself, fading out like an echo. Bigger dreams, dreams, dreams. Says the genius who failed his GED, Viet said, shaking his head again. But see, I only failed it twice, Johnny explained. 3rd time's the charm, though. I'm taking a couple business classes at LBCC, Viet said. What you ladies study? I'm undeclared, Fiona said, but I'll probably do political science, pre-law. How does she know these words? Viet looked at me expectantly. Writing, I said. It was the first thing that popped into my head. That's a major, he said. I hate writing. Me and Koala starting a business. You'll be seeing us up in Forbes in a few years. Johnny began shadowboxing, bouncing on his toes, throwing hooks and jabs in the air. Right, Koala Bear? Tell him about it. It's a secret, Koala said. He held a finger to his lips. If I tell you, I'll have to kill you. And don't worry, we'll do it nice and slow, Johnny said. His face broke into a maniacal grin. First, I'll tie you up with rope, then I'll use the pliers. He fixed his gaze on me. You got nice teeth. You had braces, huh? Shut up, asshole, Koala said. He's just messing around. You still wear retainers at night? Johnny asked. We're not scared, Fiona said, and she nudged me with her elbow. Right, Jane? I glanced over and saw that her cup was empty. I've never had braces before, I said evenly. These are just my teeth. Someone pounded hard on the door. Open up, it's the cops, we got you surrounded. I froze, but the guy started laughing. Always the same corny BS, said Koala. He walked to the door and opened it. Could use some new jokes, homie, he said. Sung strode in, grinning. The party's here, he said. He sat down next to Fiona at the foot of the bed. My friends treat you okay? She nodded, smiling. Yo, we got the other room, right? Yeah, 201, down that way. Koala threw him a set of keys. Let's go for a walk, Sung said to Fiona. He plucked at her elbow. Come with me for a sec, will you? Where? Fiona said. I want to talk to you, Sung said softly. He stood and held out a hand. Fiona stood from the bed. She was wobbly on her feet and reached towards Sung to steady herself. He threw an arm around her waist. There we go, he said. Nice and easy, gorgeous. This mother, Koala muttered. Mr. Smooth Operator. Via and Johnny were sitting up on the other bed. Someone had turned the TV on, and Koala stood by, waiting for Sung and Fiona to make it to the door so he could open it for them like some kind of butler. Hang on, I said. I stood up and grabbed Fiona's arm. You can't just take her. Chill, Sung said. He lowered his mouth to Fiona's ear and whispered something. See, he said with a triumphant smirk. She wants to come with me. Come on, Jane, you don't want to hang with us, Koala said. I thought we were getting to know each other here. Jane, Fiona mumbled, it's okay. I'm okay. She shook me off. I'll be right back. We're just going to talk. You heard her, Sung said. What's all the commotion? Johnny called out. His voice was a song. We're trying to watch porn over here. Now Koala was pulling on my arm. I stumbled back a few steps. Fiona turned back to glance at me over her shoulder. I tried our signal again. She smiled and shook her head, then looked away. Her hair was a cascade down her back. I watched them walk through the door. Koala shut it softly behind them, and then my best friend was gone. Thank you.